I find is the initial brainstorming. Now, I did say that you can start too early and you have to have everything, you have to have your basic ideas of what the project is supposed to accomplish in hand, but that doesn't mean you have to formalize it at that point. I like a tape recorder during those sessions because huge numbers of what ifs happen during that period of time. And you can go back at a later and add it into your more formal threat model at that point. Before QA testing, you got to design your test strategy. There's a whole lot of what ifs there, and you might get this sense that what if comes into a threat modeling a lot, and that's really what most, I think, threat modeling is. It's the ability to ask what if this happens to whatever. This goes to the support that was mentioned earlier, would happen a lot in emails, but anybody can email the project or the threat model owner, because there still really does have to be a single owner for making sure it's kept up to date, that type of thing. Maybe it's a couple owners, but there has to be designated ownership of the threat model. Again, it comes down to if somebody emails and say, what if? Well, now you just have to copy paste. You don't even have to really do that much. That's idealistic, of course. And then some of the tools are starting to plug into your issue tracker. Microsoft's current tool has the ability to make plugins that will talk to many common issue trackers. Issue trackers are where you collect your bugs or issues or whatever. Those can all start as vulnerabilities that can lead you to discovering new threats or vice versa. And it really doesn't matter how you contribute so long as you do. If you're part of a team that's maintaining a threat model. Conversations are wonderful. Unfortunately, a lot of times, a lot of that what if that happens in conversations gets lost, and it's really it's hard to capture that, especially even 10 minutes later. I know I have a really bad memory. I'm not going to remember something I talked about 5 minutes ago. But if you can record those down, I carry a notebook with me most of the time now and scribble things down. So. One of the other large problems I see with threat modeling right now, that it's all about data collection. There's not a whole lot of work that's been done on presenting to and considering the audience of a threat model, and it's not a single audience. There are at least 5. Your C-level and your management, they're going to be looking for the overall picture. What's the overall impact to me? An architect's going to look at how does this affect my project or application if there's an external force, especially if they're calling some other API or something like that. Developers care about what they're working on more specifically, and it gets a little bit more refined. But then you jump back out at QA, they're looking again more at the whole project. But they're looking for different things than your management team, because they're looking for new ways to create tests. And then your testers, and if there is a breach, you don't want forensics in there, but they're going to be looking at every little nitpicky thing in your threat model to help them leverage what might have happened. And can anybody think of any others? There's the audience, in my opinion, for a threat model is vast, and that's one of the main things that makes it hard to properly present, because I think it's very difficult to present the dynamic range of items that can be captured in a formal threat model to everybody, because they're looking for different things. Yeah?
I think one who is really overlooked here is also the project manager, who needs to schedule this activity in the first place. And as this activity goes on, that scheduling might need to be adjusted by that person as well. So all these people who are present during this activity, somebody is controlling that schedule, hopefully.
If you're looking at the threat modeling, when you said the project manager, I jumped into the project versus the application bit. If you're looking at threat modeling the project, which happens also, I look at the project manager as an architect. Maybe different, but I mean, they're kind of the guiding light at that point. But it's a good thing to point out. I don't disagree with you. So we mentioned release cycles a little bit and SDLs. If you have one, I believe there are a huge number of touch points that are available to a threat to perform threat modeling. We've talked about some of these already. Whether it's putting it into your release cycle keeps you updating the threat model. I think that's the most important aspect of integrating it into your release and development cycles. It starts at your security questionnaires. If you have one, a lot of larger organizations are doing that to determine whether they need to bring in that external security team. That's all information that can be included in your threat model. And then where I said that a threat model brings tells the story of your project, it's also a good way because if you've captured your business requirements and passed your architecture review, it's a good way to get those requirements to what the developers are actually supposed to write. So that can all be captured. And this all goes towards re-emphasizing that you're already performing a lot of these actions and they can be used to also support your threat model without creating an extraordinary burden on top of the normal project creation. And then we've talked about test plans already and security reviews. One of the things that I think can additionally help unburden the threat modeling process is creating templates. If you create a web app, if your job is to create web apps and you have a whole bunch of different web apps or different services, they have a set of threats that are going to come up a lot. And you can use those and leverage those, and it doesn't even matter. You might have to go through and enumerate them at some point because some of them may not be appropriate for this particular project, or maybe you already have a known set of mitigations in place. But it does reduce that burden quite a bit, and goes back again to using it as part of your life cycle of your project set. But grow your template library. The more things that you do, the more projects that you create, the more opportunity you have to create templates, which will again further on reduce your burden later on for starting up that initial bit of a threat model. Yeah.
I think it's important with templates to realize that you have to maintain those templates as well. Because
I agree. Yeah.
your organization and mitigation strategies may change as a result of certain things. Like, for example, if you have an organization that maintains the application firewall, and an application firewall is a mitigating factor for a particular threat that you've identified, and that organization goes into life with an application firewall. That's a problem, and so it needs to be evaluated. You can't just copy and paste your templates into your threat model. They have to be active.
I agree. I mean, they're essentially a threat model too, right? Yeah.
What's your pros and cons of releasing your templates to your application developer? A lot of time I get, they ask us, okay, what do you guys do? Go to a security review. How do you do a threat modeling and so on and so forth? And then we just say, okay, we have this model, this template we use when we go through the checklist. And some application development manager at the end said, okay, how about giving us that? We'll go do that for you. What is the pros and the cons of that? What is your feeling on releasing such a document?
I'm in favor of it.
Why?
Because I think everybody that can should participate in security of an application.
I understand that, but however, the problem is these are not security-related people. Obviously, developers half the time. If any developers in this room, I apologize, not saying you guys, but developers are not in the business of securing software. They're in the business of developing software. That's their job. So half the time, they don't understand what needs to be done. They just say, okay, check this, check this, check this, check this. Okay, we're good with this.
So let them have a pass at it, and then you review it.
Well, do that, because half the time, the problem with that is the application manager grab that template that we provide. That is a static template. Obviously, it needs to be maintained and so on and so forth. They'll use it and they'll just say, from now on, all the application team does this, and then they just use the same template. And then, okay, we went to a security review. And then a couple of months later, we say, what? How did you go to a security review? Oh, we went through it ourselves.
So that sounds like a mindset problem.
That's a mindset problem, because that's a problem because we gave out so one time said this is what we use. From that point on, they thought they got smart, so they don't need to engage on the security review anymore. They don't come back to us anymore. They disappear into the black hole, and then when there's a breach or when there's an issue, and come back and say, well, we went through your checklist. What happened? That's an issue.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that being an issue, but I mean, I still lean towards it's people who, threat modeling doesn't necessarily have to be, it's a security-minded practice, but it doesn't have to be performed by security-minded people. It's performed by people who ask, what if this happens? And that's how you create your security around it. If they're trying to get past the checkbox, again, that's where the mindset issue comes from. And if you're giving them a template, I'm still in favor of it, but it sounds like there needs to be some guidance that goes along with it, or maybe review of their work to be able to validate that, because if they're not security-minded people, they can't make that stamp of approval, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. So the last thing I really kind of wanted to talk a little bit about is tools. If you have them, I'm in favor of you using them, but use them uniformly across your organization. Again, that comes back to same language, same words. Microsoft has a couple of them out. This one is end of life, but it came with an attack library, which was kind of cool to give you ideas. But if you wanted to add new things to it, that became a little bit more difficult, and it felt a little bit clunky to use, but I love the data that it used to collect. It is now end of life, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, because I think their new tool is better. But it was a little bit confusing for a while because it used the CIA's terminology instead of Stride Dread after Microsoft came out with Stride Dread. So they had a little bit of a consistency issue there. And then there's the current tool. It's currently supported. They're still building it. I'm not real comfortable using it, but that could be the way that I'm trying to use it, not fitting in with the way that I perform a threat model. This is the one that can plug into your issue tracking system, which I heavily recommend. And it's not quite free because it won't work unless you have Visio. So the download is...
2007.
Huh?
Visio 2007.
Yeah, it's working 2010. Doesn't work.
That's a specific version of Visio.
Oh, okay, I might need to update that.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so there's some issues with that, and that's all to support the data flow diagrams, which I think are helpful aspects of a threat model, but not required. Another tool that's out there is Trike. This has kind of gone mothballed a little bit. They say the next version's coming out. It's also not a very scalable tool. I'm interested in these guys because they're trying to push what threat modeling means and trying to automate a large section of it by defining your actions, and anything that's not a defined action is an unintended action, and you create that threat tree that way. There's a couple other tools. There's practical threat analysis, which I haven't had the opportunity to use, but it seems to be gaining some popularity. There's probably a couple others out there I haven't had time to go explore. What do I use? I have this stupidly massive Excel spreadsheet with 13 tabs, just to try to keep track of all the information that I want to keep track of in a threat model. And I don't use it because this could be very much my Excel foo is lacking, but I like bidirectional cross-references, which I can't do in Excel the way I want it. So I end up writing my threat models in Word or Notepad or some text editor, but it's a matter of just trying to capture everything down. Common pitfalls, I've already said it's not a one-person job. Presentation's always an issue. I think right now, don't ever delete. And you need to properly identify your assets. You should also avoid doomsday situations. The threat model is meant to try to create realistic threats, and you can, there's always, if the earth stops spinning, what's going to happen to my application? Okay, well, do you really care at that point? And you can also go too deep. We've seen the logarithmic diagrams where your security cost goes up and then it levels off. I think it goes up faster and levels off faster on threat modeling, so it's a matter of trying to use your touch points as light touch points and using activities that you're already performing as part of your release cycle and development processes into a threat